Howdy, folks.
Hi there.
How's everyone doing?
Very well. How about
Good,
yourself?
good.
Good.
How are
Yeah,
you?
yeah, not bad. Thanks for asking. It's a nice sunny day still. We've got a good bit of weather in September still, which is nice. Yeah, good to have you guys on. Thanks for joining. It should be a fun conversation. Looking forward to it.
Main reason I'm here is to have a fun conversation with you now.
Right. Yeah, we have a lot of those, don't we? So let me just see if I can close up this questions box. Give us a bit more room. There we go. That's better. Much better.
Oh, had that.
Cool. All right. So, demystifying a lot of hot topics in tech: AI, automation, data strategy, and cybersecurity. So, let's get started with maybe a couple of introductions. Um, I'll start. So, Navin Randhawa, Technical Director of Unizen, and one of two gracious hosts. We obviously do a lot in the technology space, cybersecurity, managed services, and consulting. I'll pass off to Sean to introduce himself next.
Yeah, I'm Sean. I work in the strategy and operations for Unizen, working very closely with Navin, very, very closely. Yeah, I've had a background in technology, and that technology background evolved into more of a project management process development background, which is pivotal for Unizen. And here we are, working partners.
Right, and if we move on to Samit next.
Hi, yeah. So I'm Samit Baines. I'm currently product manager working in pharma, but I've done a bunch of previous jobs before that, but looking at drug manufacturing, research and development, as well as automation in the lab and manufacturing spaces for pharma.
Ooh. And Aaron?
Hi everyone, my name is Aaron Kara. I'm a data scientist. I work at Nomura. I actually previously started my career in data governance and then shifted over to data science. So it's enabled me to use data science to actually solve data risk and controls and all that other related stuff problems. Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Thank you all for coming. It sounds like we've got a good amount of knowledge in the room. So, yeah, let's dive into our first question.
We do that now. Just looking at the comments, it seems there's no audio for one or maybe a few of the participants.
Oh, I see. Okay. Let's have a little look there.
Maybe checking if any of the other participants are having the same issue.
Can you guys hear me?
Hear you, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Hang on, technical difficulty. Thanks for raising. Please hold, callers.
Can hear. I think we've got some. Okay, so I think some people can definitely hear us. I've got confirmation of that. Smith, I'd recommend maybe some troubleshooting methods potentially.
Sure.
Having the same issue.
Yeah, no, the audio is definitely working.
Check the audio input.
Yeah,
We're all good. We're all good. Let's continue because I think it might just be one or two of the participants.
Okay. So
okay, all right. Let's do that. Thank you for the check. Cool. So yeah, let's dive into the first question. Right. So we've got some really big topics, spaces in technology. Mentioned the AI, data strategy, and cybersecurity, and these are big topics, really important. Most of them, all of them, are cornerstones in a lot of businesses. They're becoming more important in people's everyday lives, in their personal lives as well. So as domain specialists, go around the room. I think the question is, what's the most misunderstood area about your domain? So what is the common thing you guys hear to say, that's making me cringe, but it's not their fault because there's always a problem of education, right? And that's hopefully what we're here to resolve. So I'll start around cybersecurity. So usually people think of cybersecurity, they're thinking of a lot of money is involved with making it right or maintaining it. Although that can be true, if you're a large bank and you've got a lot of assets to protect, obviously a lot of assets to protect, and you've got very motivated attackers, that can become a pretty expensive problem. But what people fail to realize is that the problem does scale down with what you're protecting and the size, right? So one of the things that Rocklight is making cybersecurity very much available. A little bit. feedback then. So yeah, I mean, I'll dive into it a little bit deeper, but for us, it's folks understanding the absolute width and breadth of cybersecurity, and a lot of people think that they need everything, and because everything is expensive, they may not necessarily dip their toe into that field. But what we try to do is we try to take a risk-based approach, right? So let's say we're working with a bakery, right? So hey, what are your guys' risks? Well, really, we're physically oriented. We don't really do too much in the world of computers. Okay, the only really thing we do on computers is we've got our IP, our super duper bed breaking baking recipe on that one computer there in the corner. Okay, well, how do we protect that? That's going to be millions and billions of dollars. But yeah, very brief intro to my domain there. Why don't we go next to Aaron? What's your space looking like in that? So that's AI and data.
I would say that it's definitely a hot topic now. So there's a lot of misconceived notions about AI being some sort of, and data science in general being some sort of magic bullet that you can shoot at a problem and it will solve it effortlessly, and you don't even need human intervention. And I think I've seen that time and time again. And it's not unique to any one organization or any one industry. I've seen it in financial services. I've heard from other people in their own industries as well, where people don't understand their own data. And so they think they can use AI to fix their problems, right? And so it's this overestimation of AI's capabilities. We're not in this era where we have general intelligence, where we can throw AI at a problem and it will do it. We need context behind it. We need to solve problems. Like, for example, at work, somebody would say to me, "Hey, Aaron, how can data science help us?" And if you give me a vague request like that, you'll get a vague response back. You need to be fairly specific with your problem statement, such that then you can utilize AI and data science to solve it. Because at the end of the day, most AI systems, they're designed for specific tasks. They don't possess general intelligence, and therefore it's not applicable across all domains. If I create a model to solve, let's say, credit card fraud using AI and data science, it's not so transferable if I wanted to then, improve the stock taking or the stock inventory management of a supermarket. They're very, very different systems. So I think that's the biggest misconception that I've seen, is that AI is some super silver bullet that can save the world, when in reality it's not. And there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, which I'll probably touch on later on with other questions and throughout the webinar.
I've got a great question for later on, and it's, can AI bake my bread? And you might have an answer for that. But okay, thank you for that, Aaron. Smee, what's your take?
So before I go on to mine, I think it plays nicely off of yours, Nav, which was, essentially it might cost too much. And I just think it's really interesting when you said that, because it's like, well, are you not even going to then evaluate tech options at all? Are you just happy to operate as you continuously, operate at the moment?
You're talking about automation specifically here, right?
Yeah, but is it not worth evaluating options? And I think it's really interesting, because my domain is obviously pharma, right? And I think what people might not appreciate as much, where you look at other industries that have tech deployments, automation deployments, or even AI ones, is that pharma is probably more averse to change than any of the other areas because of the high level of regulation, right? Ultimately, all the platform systems and automation we deploy look at supporting development and manufacturing and the managed product lifecycle management of medicines, right? And these medicines are essentially for people, and adverse effects could occur if data was wrong, for example, as a stretch. But so we typically face a lot of comments like, oh yeah, but have you thought about how this might impact the data in a different system, or how that could impact product quality at the end of the day? That's what we need to protect the most. But that's not to say that, we don't go off and start looking at different ways to solve problems that we face. So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then, talking about how we then approach that, I think we'll cover later on. But yeah, I just think it's interesting how close it relates to what you were talking about in terms of, oh yeah, but actually this might cost too much. But, what's the cost of doing a cost benefit analysis? How much is it going to cost to put together an RFI and approach someone and say, how would you solve this problem? Companies are hungry to want your business, right? So they're going to work with you to understand whether they can develop proposals for it. So yeah, that's probably what I've got going on in pharma.
So there's a recurring theme of of education on how to correctly engage these domains, right? So, all right, we'll see if that comes up again. And Sean, so you got strategy in your area. Tell us about that.
Most misunderstood area about strategy, and I'll bucket in operations in that as well. And I'll also say, especially in the lens of a business in its infancy, is understand the difference between what feels right and what's actually going to be right for an organization as it starts up. When it comes to AI and automation, I'll kind of circle back on that. But when you are a business, on its baby steps, it feels like you're literally a little dingy boat in the middle of the ocean. Maybe you're lucky and you have a compass, and you can hopefully have an expert holding that compass, and they can look at the stars. They can hopefully just take you in the right direction. And you have to rely a lot on very small amounts of resources, whether that's your expert knowledge that you have accrued from years or whatever, or whatever you currently have in the boat. And I feel like a lot of people, as I think Aaron or Samit said, they want to use it as a magic pill. I want to have all the services, all the tools to get us quickly to the fastest end result. But what do you have in the boat? I've got a t-shirt. Let me take it off. I can use it as a sail to get to that island faster. I don't have to buy anything. I can just use what I have. You don't have to go to bleeding edge technology to get you where you need to go, because you learn a lot on the way to actually get in there. So I'd say that's a pretty big part of it. And as you start building momentum and that strategy and operation to get to the right area, sometimes you can be lost at sea for a while as you start a business in its infancy, and you go, I kind of see dry land over there. I think I'm in the right direction finally. And you're looking at your compass, which might be 1 degree off, which after like 2 years at it can be very, very off piste. And you're approaching this island and you see, great, the currents are pulling me in. This is awesome. I'm going in the right direction. I must be doing something right. My entire surroundings are pulling me there. But you see a big dark cloud pulling you in. You go, that might not be the right idea. And then the strategy part of it is, okay, do I have a good community around me? Who's next to me? Who's going to help me out? Does that compass person know, what? We're pedaling in a seemingly right direction, but that's not the right way. We need to be out and sea just a little bit longer, bird in those seas, because dry land's actually over there. I know we want to land there, but it's not going to be good. It's going to be a lot of unnecessary costs, pain, and that business won't even survive by the time we get there. So when it comes to AI automation, accurate problem statements count, because it helps you direct where you need to actually go. So I'd say that's the most misunderstood part of it. Because what feels right isn't actually what's right all the time. It requires a lot of context.
Yeah. So resourcefulness and evaluation sound like some important themes there. Cool.
Every step of the way, yeah.
Yeah. Good answer. Fantastic. Okay. So I think we're starting to get a flavour of where these domains live in terms of the context of what people watching either now or if they watch a recording, what they might be experiencing on the other end of this, right? So they're not the domain experts. They're the people who saw the co-pilot advertising on the tube station, or they've seen strategy driven by automation. Just buy this tool and it'll get fixed for you. That's what they've been advertised, right? Let's not beat around the bush. So if that person's now in front of you, and we'll go around the room again, they're expecting to fly the second they start thinking about one of these domains. But if you were there to say, hey, look, here's how you should be looking to walk before you can run, how would you introduce someone to the right things to think about, the right questions to ask, to actually begin their journey on data, AI, cyber, or strategy? So Aaron, why don't we start with you on that one? What would you say?
So if you're trying to use AI and data science to improve your business, no matter what it is, I mean, there's several challenges that a big firm has and a small enterprise will face. And we can touch on those in a bit, like tackling legacy systems and all that. The first thing is, as Sean said, is you have to identify your problem statement, because if you don't know the problem you're trying to solve, then you're just going to be walking around blind. So you need clear business objectives, because again, it's not, can AI solve anything for me? Can data science solve anything for me? It's not about that. It's how can we actually solve this particular problem in a much more effective manner? Can AI actually solve this? And we also have to be cognizant of the fact that just because we can use AI, just because we can use data science, doesn't mean we should. We don't need to throw these complex, cutting edge technologies at it if we can just solve it with some simple linear regression or something, or just look at a simple trend and identify, this is where it's going wrong in this particular quarter. Let's delve into that. I think then if we're talking about from where do I get started, right? So again, we have the business problem. Then we actually need to take stock of where we are. So a lot of the time, people aren't aware of what they actually have in their own homes, right? If we talk about a concept called data readiness, right? Data inventory, like, okay, what data do I have? Do I even have the data that I need to solve my problem? Like for example, if let's say I'm saying I want to be able to tell which customers are most profitable, but within my database, the quality of my customer data is terrible. I've already shot myself at the knees. So we need to look at our own data. We need to assess the quality of that and then tie that back to the business problem. Do I have what I need to solve the problem? And if I do, great. If then we need to use something like AI or data science to then solve it, then we can. But we should always try and start simple. With any problem that you're trying to solve in business, whether you're a small enterprise, whether you're large, it doesn't matter. You add layers of complexity. You never start super complex. You only you start simple and then you add layers of complexity. And to do that and to manage that and to actually, because you need buy-in as well, right? You can't just go and be like, I need X amount of money for AI projects and data science, because people are just going to shoo you away, and people are fearful. People think, oh, it will take our jobs, irrespective of whether it's rational or irrational thoughts. People do have these thoughts. So the best thing to do is once you identify your business problem, once you take stock of your data, then look at pilot projects. Okay, what can I do? Choose low risk, high value projects. I don't really like using these cliche terms, but the low hanging fruit, try and tackle those first. And then you can build on your complexity. Then you can actually build your AI journey. Because again, it's very important to understand that it's not, we land here, we're doing AI, that's it. It's a journey, and you learn about your own firm, you learn about your own capabilities, and you learn about your culture. And I'd say that's the approach you should take when you're starting out with AI and data science. That it's not always good to start at the peak end of technology, because I'll be honest, in my experience, very often, many business problems nowadays do not need the most complex solutions. They really don't. You can simplify things. Sometimes the smartest people are really good at making a really difficult problem simple, but lots of people want to complex or complicate things for no reason. So that's my stance on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, sledgehammer to crack a nut, right? And that's been something that repeats itself in history, right? And you could say it's for the beauty of a new technology and people wanting to implement it because it's cool. But to Sean's point, if we've got the t-shirt in the dinghy, let's start there and move forward there. So
change needs to be digestible by the business, by the user base, whatever it is, right? I feel like a lot of people, if you're implementing multiple solutions, it can get dangerous because you can't actually measure the impact of said solutions. It's better to maybe do one at a time, see how it actually affects. Is this helping the business in a proactive way or not? So yeah.
I mean, and that'd be interesting to me because we were talking earlier today about unstructured data, and that was something that possibly irritates you a little bit. So how does that play into the wider automation piece?
So even before I talk about unstructured data, I think just touching back on, we've mentioned problem statements quite a few times now, and even what Sean was touching on there in terms of multiple solution implementation. So before I talk about unstructured data, I think it's important to touch on a couple of things. Problem statements, right? They're used in a variety of industries. I used to be a process engineer working on a site for manufacturing, and we'd have a problem. And, I've always followed the same approach to my problem statements. It's 1, what is the problem? 2, what is the impact? And then that should really be where the problem statement ends. And then anything below that is, solutioning. So it's really important when you're setting up something like this, and we've been talking about the problems we want to solve by the business, is to understand, what is the problem? What is the impact? And then outside of the problem statement, you can talk about where is the position that I want to be in through this tech deployment or through this AI implementation. And that should stay with you through the life of the project. And as you move through your stages of going for your RFI, reaching out to different people in terms of, can you solve these problems? You should be understanding essentially, and then I move into, for example, requirements gathering, and I might move into then, testing, proof of concept, etc. Am I still going to be solving these problems throughout the same life cycle, in the life cycle of that project? It's the same as project management. Because I see too often like if you don't review that every time and different people come in with different requirements and other parts of the organization, particularly big ones, you can eventually lose so much sight. So you can be so far away from what we're trying to solve, and you'll never deploy anything because, you know, different people want in. But also I think what's interesting is I've been on both sides of this, right? Where define your business problem, and then we can start looking at how we can solution this, right? But sometimes people that just do their job don't think there's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Or they're not aware as to what technology can do for them, right? What AI could even do for them. We hear it all the time. Like, look at what AI can do for you. And, you know, Copilot has some nice uses where I can generate a bunch of bullet points and it can just deliver me a nice email. A few years ago, I wouldn't have even assumed that was even possible. Some people today probably don't even know it's possible. You know what I mean? So sometimes what ends up happening is you need to, you know, as sort of the tech business partnership area, which we all work in, is say to people, well, you know, at the moment I have this this tool or this platform that could help you do potential number of things, and you need to contextualize it for them. You need to contextualize it to them. You need to say, you know, for example, can you talk to me a bit about your data, what you do with what's your business process? And you need to put that in front of them and say, well, look, imagine if it was structured in this way and I could do this for you, for example. Something that I've been working on very recently where I was displaying, you know, materials to stakeholders, or before that, I was talking in concept. Imagine if we had this structured data and I put it in this tool, think about the reuse cases, think about the automation I could do off of it. They were all just looking at me with blank faces, and they were talking about, you know, we don't want this to be another project that spins the wheels. We don't want this to be something that just sort of goes nowhere. What business problem are you trying to solve? Was able to give them a high level of examples of things we could. But until I actually showed them their business process in a development environment, that was when all the ideas started flooding out. Oh yeah, I can see how it might be useful for this. I can see how we could use it in this instance. And, you know, we should think about presenting this at this forum. And it's all fantastic. And then what you need to do, that's when what I was talking about earlier is so important. Well, hold on. Let's define a baseline principle now of things we're going to aim for in like a minimal viable product, first deployment, and let's stick to that now. Because as this develops, more people get exposure to this, they're just going to want to continue to add more and more in scope creep. And I'm sure, you know, Sean and Navin working in this space and, you know, making sure your scope stays the same. People want to add more things to it. It's critical. Otherwise, again, you'll never be able to deploy anything. So whilst I agree in terms of setting yourself up for success in a deployment, should start with the problems you're trying to solve and the impact that you want to correct, and also the metrics by which you'll measure your success of that. I think sometimes what I've come to see and learn is you need to be able to give people context. Business people want to hear about their data, their problems. Don't just sell them a tool. Show them what their business process looks like in that tool. It's critical. But yeah, so that was that piece. And then just quickly on unstructured data, it comes back to the stuff we were talking about with AI, right? Like, people think AI, Aaron said it perfectly. People come in and say, oh, AI will solve all my problems. And it's like, look, AI is powerful. It's not yet at a point which it can do everything for you. But can you sort your data quality out first? Can you sort out can you structure your data a bit better? Because if you do, if I fed AI a bunch of documents where people are referring to different things in different ways and describing things in different ways, what AI will be able to do with it would be much more powerful if actually that data was like a structured sequence of terms that I could select from, and therefore the AI will, like, you know, have a structured input and be able to deliver a much better output. Our utilization of AI at the moment, I believe, is limited by the fact that we don't give it structured data inputs. Not to say that, you know, that wouldn't take a lot of time sometimes, but yeah, I think it's important to sort your data quality out and data structure out at the start.
Well, and it's a really good point, right? Because it's recognition of the problem. Because I think you can say that to a bunch of people who are familiar enough with the technology, and they'll say, yeah, no, that makes sense. But if I'm now talking to a C-level or a stakeholder who, technology isn't their domain, but all they've been marketed is AI can fix it all, or automation can fix it all, and then in his head he just got a bunch of techies saying no, you need to fix this first. We're just the naysayers, right? So just an analog I came up with there whilst you were talking about that was going to the gym, right? You can go to the gym, but if you're not feeding yourself correctly, or it's changing every other day, and one day you're having a pack of 12 Krispy Kremes, and the next day it's going to be a multi-pack of ice cream, and then whatever it's going to be, and
Where's
then
the ice cream?
where's the ice cream? Actually, they're a lot lower calorie, Chef. And you're wondering, well, obviously we've got to put more gyms, the AI or whatever subject matter I'm going to put in, all of them in this case actually. But if we don't look at the sort of first foundation steps, it's never going to work, right? And you just kind of go crazy.
100%. And I just want to, it just sparked a thought in my head when you were talking about bread, right? Bread recipe. Let's think about that for a second in AI. Like, imagine I had a not even a cookbook. Imagine if I had a series of steps that described how to make bread by two different authors, right? And they described the steps in different ways. And one of them said, mix until dough is of a certain quality. And another one said, mix until a bread is of a certain quality. And one described it as hard and one described it as firm. And another author described it in a different way, for example. So that's just one step, right? But obviously there's going to be, 20 steps, maybe that's too many in making the bread or whatever. So imagine if that was a structured data input. So rather than saying mix until X, right? For this quantity of bread, you had a data object that was just called mix, and there was a time associated to it. And I had an ability to measure that firmness, for example. If I asked AI to run me a simulation to say, which one of these bread processes will produce the most amount of goods for me, or be the most efficient, or run the shortest time, if that data is structured, it will have a much easier job in making sure that answer is right first time, rather than having to understand the language and do the rest of it that we know AI can do. It will make that job more right first time, basically. You'll be able to trust it a lot more. So hopefully that puts into perspective, some context to structured data, and then using the likes of an AI program to be able to answer questions for you.
Yeah, and good thread of conversation, right? I mean, so I think, Brilliant Bread Limited, we just started it now. If we could go out to GPT, whatever public models we want, and try and amalgamate the best recipe with loosely worded ingredients. Sorry, what do you call them? Recipes. Or we can say, actually, you know what? Sean knows a thing or two about bread. He's actually a pretty good cook, but I don't think he's ever baked bread. But let's say he did, right? And he knows a thing or two about bread. And he's got a secret sauce, but there's many types of bread. There's I don't know them all. I don't eat enough bread, but there's many types of bread, and there'll be a different sort of special instruction for each one that Sean might have. Now, if we could start plugging that in to, let's say, a custom AI model, Aaron, can you bake me bread? I asked that question earlier. We might start getting really relevant things, outputs to our intellectual property and our business, right? Making it very relevant to what we're doing as a business specifically. Because at the moment, if we go out to the World Wide Web and whatever Chat GPT or whatever model's been trained on, you're going to get a generic-ish answer based on the information it's been fed, right? So if we get to a use case where we want to feed in really specific information, and obviously something more complicated than ingredients, but I think that's where we can start getting quite intelligent with things that we're going to do. Because I think, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think some companies are actually now creating their own, models within their business that are obviously private, and they're sort of creating their own data structures. And I haven't seen the output of any of that. I've not been involved in one, but could you speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, the way these large language models work I won't go into too much detail and scare people with the maths, but you'll have a base model, right? A foundational model, which you'll be trained on, and it'll take a long time. It's a lot of compute that you need, right? And what will make up this model are certain parameters, like its weights and biases, right? So these numbers that represent the model itself, it'll dictate the answers that it does, right? And whenever it's spitting out words, whatever, it's a probabilistic model. So what's the probability of the next word being X or Y, right? Now, what companies now can do is they can take these models and then they can do something called fine-tuning. So they'll take like an instance within their own environment, their own infrastructure, and then they'll fine-tune it and they'll tweak it to their needs. And so they can become very specified models. Because as I alluded to before, we're not in the era of general intelligence where we can have something that is all-knowing. It's rather we take something public or whatever, or it has some kind of foundational model. We put it in our infrastructure, and then we feed it specific data. And I think that's the key of it. It's the specificity of the data that we're feeding it, which will actually give us the right answers. And I think if we like the principles behind this are not new, right? Like when we're talking about specific information, when we're talking about specific instructions, when we're making sure that we have something that's specific to our use case, this is not new stuff. It's not groundbreaking stuff. It's just the same principles, just applied to a new technology. At the end of the day, we're using something that has been trained on a backbone of data, and we want to make sure that it can perform to our specific needs. Therefore, we have to ensure that we feed it the relevant data.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, right? Okay, and then I think, Sean, we hadn't come to you. We kind of got away with a bit of a conversation, which is great. And just to bring it back, so it was about how would you guide someone who's trying to make early progress in your domain of strategy? How would you guide them the right way, right? Because I'm not sure how much there is about quick strategy 101, but given that you've got experience in the field and Brilliant Bread Limited has just started up, how would you advise them on how to create, define, measure, verb here, strategy? What would you say?
That's a multifaceted question. So is Big Bread Limited a new company, and I'm giving them advice on how to start it off in a strategy perspective?
Yeah, and feel free to adapt their product offering to include whatever service fits your example.
Well, if I was the strategy person of that opening company, the key focus for me is, and it's a bit of a tangent from talking about AI and automation, because I'm not as well versed as everyone on this call is ensuring the people in that group or that community is effective for the end goal.
Got you. As in, you're talking about a sort of like a use case, a matrix of skills, or
there's a case of you need to understand what the customer is, right? If I don't know who I'm selling to, like what type of bread am I making? Who am I selling this bread to? What type of market is it? Do I just want to make bread for everyone? Some people, I don't know. So there's going to be a level of internal discovery of what the business actually wants to produce and why it wants to produce it. Because if you don't know that, I suppose I'm filling in the blanks here with my lack of AI knowledge. I don't know what I'm actually trying to develop and make. I can't make a refined AI model, make me this type of exact recipe, because the model's going to say, what do you want specifically? I don't know.
I mean, even outside of AI, though, I mean, let's almost park AI. AI is an element of the strategy, right? Mm-hmm. So but they're sitting there in that. Hey.
It was just to reply. I think Sean's spot on, right? In terms of, I think what I hear that as is, if you're partnering with a company, right, and you're going to help them develop their strategy in automation or AI, it's understanding what they do, right? Particularly what I see in tech business partnership is people come from tech, don't understand the domain. People come from the domain and they don't understand tech. That bit in the middle is critical. And that's what services like your company provide, right? You want to go in and you want to understand what it is that they want to do. And that's what Sean's saying, right? You want to understand, what's special about your bread? How do you want to market it? Which group do you want to market it to? How much do you want to make, for example? What things do you want to retain in your business, essentially? Because, far too often someone will come in and be like, I can offer you these services or these services, but I think what's critical is for the people in tech that do the business partnership, they should be able to explain the business process, what that business wants to do, as well as the people that work in the business. Obviously, the people that do that for their day in, day out job will always have more domain knowledge and always have more deep-rooted technical knowledge in the processes that they're trying to execute, right? But what's critical is for the partnership between tech and business is to make sure that the person in tech completely understand. If you manage to find someone in the business that can also understand, how tech works, how configuration of certain tools and workflows can work, fantastic. But I really think the onus needs to be more on the people in tech to understand the reality of what it is the business people are trying to do. I think it's critical to the deployment in that space.
Yeah, I think also to build on that, I think, again, being that strategy with that understanding of tech view, if you're starting off and I was to give advice to the person, you need a very detailed vision. Because if you don't have a detailed vision, you really don't know where you're going. And it can get dangerous with a very detailed vision, because sometimes this is where it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If I know exactly what I want the most perfect Krispy Kreme, I think it's a bread, but with my own little bespoke approach to make this amazing business which is going to take over the world, and only I know how it's going to taste and be amazing, and no one else understands it quite as well, I become a bit of an echo chamber of what I think is the right way to go forward, which is very dangerous, because then you don't really take external advice and user feedback or client feedback or your particular business partners. And the inverse is true. If you rely too much on external stimulus to tailor what your vision is going to be, then it's not really your vision anymore, and it just becomes this kind of averaged out product that doesn't really hit the market as a niche, and it doesn't really do anything. So striking that fine line between don't be too much of your own echo chamber, and not listening to everyone else and just not really performing your own vision, I think is the advice I'd give to myself. And it comes down to who you're surrounding yourself with. Have you got the right steps in place as you're progressing through this journey? You know, week 1, month 1, 6 months from now, am I still aligned with my vision? Have I gone a bit off the path? Might have done, but I know how to kind of come back to what my average is.
Yeah, that's a great answer, isn't it? Because it's really, as you say, it's easy to give, very quickly be in one camp or the other camp, right? Yeah, so you take on, if you essentially just regurgitate what the market is telling you around you, you've not added anything to it, you've just copied another service or product, right? Versus if you've created a 6 foot long baguette, which is 2 inches wide because you think it's going to be great, I think you might struggle getting that in Tesco's front door for starters.
I think Subway tried that, didn't work.
Well, what, 6 foot? They did work.
I actually think they did. I was saying that in jest, but I might be unfortunately right in that.
I think it did work. Or they cut, I don't know. I'm sure someone would have bought that. Maybe we chose a bad example, but no, it's a really good point, isn't it? And what would you say, Sean, to small businesses and maybe even medium and large ones? Because I think you can easily get so far along, a path and not evaluate yourself, not because you don't want to, just because the busyness of your job, the business, personal life, gets away with you very quickly, and before you know it, it's 6 o'clock and you thought you just woke up 3 hours ago, right? You haven't even had lunch. The person in that type of space, what's a question, or rather, what's a statement you would say to that person to help them align back onto a strategy or create one or check it? What would you say to that person?
Something maybe a bit off a business conversation. To stay clear with your strategy requires you to have an objective mind and a clear head to think. And in order to do that, whether it's work or personal life, I think staying healthy, keeping active, or whatever that might be for the individual, is really important. Because if you kind of lose track of yourself and where you want to be, you lose that objectivity because you don't have the clarity of mind to really think anymore, and then you start deviating off a path. Because when you started off with that original idea, you probably were in great spirits, and now you're 6 months down the road and you haven't really taken care of yourself. Are you going to have the right type of vision that you had back then? Maybe not. So it's a good prerequisite to make sure you're staying healthy and keeping focus on that approach, because then things fall into place just a little bit easier.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? Because burnout's real, but there's one person who can stop it.
That's true. Burnout does happen. It's not if, it's when, but it's preventable. And you can prevent it from happening again and again and again. So then it just becomes an if. Ideally, that's the plan.
Exactly. Well, if burnout isn't presenting itself to you more than once or twice, you may not be trying hard enough on the other side of the fence. I might have some naysayers there, but healthy work-life balance, I promise. We never work past 6, apart from today.
This isn't work.
Okay. This isn't work. This is fun. That's true. I'm learning all the time.
I think just to add to that though, Nav, I think it's definitely harder, I think, for the much smaller organizations, but we do often find ourselves, regardless of where you work, in firefighting situations rather than looking forward, fixing the shit that's hit the fan now, rather than what can I do in the future? And I think the only thing that I can think to help work on that is to, even if you're a couple of man team or whatever, is just And the same goes for larger organizations. Is just set up some time, whether it's your your quarterly review of how you're doing. Essentially, say, have a look at my results and understand, is there things that I want to try and be impacting here? Dedicating some time, essentially, to say, what are the other things that we could potentially be looking at? We know we have all this stuff to deal with. That's your daily operation or your weekly operation reviews or whatever it is, right? Like your weekly or daily meetings. But whether it's once a quarter or whatever else, is being able to take a step back, have a holistic view and think, you know what, there's something here that maybe we need to try and fix. And dedicating that time, at least you have it there. And then at least you can start to have that free space to ideate. But also completely agree with Sean, like, taking that time out for yourself is critical, man, because your best ideas probably do come to you when you're not at your desk. I've had conversations with you now before, you're like, just had to take a break or whatever, and like, do you know what? Then I was stressing and this and that, but then I realized actually we could solve it like this, and you need to take that and be able to take that step back. So wholeheartedly agree with that, Sean.
I'd like to touch on that firefighting mode as well, because one thing I've noticed as well is that you have to be careful how you solve things, because often we are in the pursuit of doing something very fast and we want it done yesterday and everything like that, right? There's a nasty phrase that has reared its ugly head, which is tactical solution. Try and stay away from tactical solutions, I think, as much as you can. I know like it's very difficult, but the problem is that the more tactical solutions you do, the more tactical solutions you need to do to fix your other tactical solutions. And it's a vicious cycle, and it will continue to repeat itself until you actually get to the root cause. So there have been cases where, I've somehow mustered and struck up the courage to say no, and say, no, we should do it like this, and I think that's very important. Think of the bigger picture and think that if I solve it today, instead of taking the time to solve it in 2 days, what are the implications? Often deadlines are movable, right? Nothing is as urgent as it ever seems. I'm sure all of us have been like, oh God, you need this Monday morning. Monday morning comes, and your boss arrives Monday afternoon, right? And understanding that buying yourself time and buying yourself those precious hours can actually be the difference between having a solution that is sustainable and having one that you constantly need to remediate every few weeks or something, that it's really going to cause you a lot of problems down the line. And then that in itself can cause burnout to both yourself and the wider team.
I think that, sorry, Islam, I just wanted to say that back to that. I think that's a really good point, Aaron, in terms of the idea that you fix something you think is, it's a really quick fix. And then suddenly someone's over here is like, I need to fix this problem with a really quick fix. And then someone over here that actually feeds, like the data feeds into, is like, oh my God, what the hell am I supposed to do with these two different sets of information stored in different systems and like can't access it or whatever. And eventually if you keep making smaller and smaller changes, or building these technical solutions, you so nicely put it, you can end up with a mess at the end. Which is why, like, in all industries, again, engineering, it's ubiquitous, but it's, that idea of change control and actually looking at, if I implement X, what's the knock-on effect on Y, basically. And I think, again, that's really important for tech, automation, AI deployments, and something that, comes down to business partnership. It's saying, if we're going to implement these changes, what potential impact could there be downstream? When you come up with these ideas, because it's not to say that I couldn't have a technical solution. And actually, you know what? Not that bad an idea, but it's taking that one step back just before you click go. Same as you do with many big decisions in your life. Not always, but a lot of the time, it's just saying, is this a good idea? Have I thought about the potential consequences of systems interactions, or a future roadmap if this aligns to that? And asking that question beforehand, I think, is really important.
I think.
I No, please go ahead.
I also think just like another impact that isn't as talked about when it comes to working to the wire all the time is it develops a bit of an unhealthy psychology of, I only work when it's urgent because that's when most of the work has to be done, and it doesn't build the right association, and then you kind of work really hard, you spike up a lot of your effort, you burn out a little bit quicker, and then you kind of procrastinate a little bit, and then the urgency hits you again, and it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and you realize, I think I've taken too much work, I can't do any more work, I need to take a back seat. And you have to essentially do a bit of a remapping of your brain on how do I approach work again? Because I kept working under extreme deadlines and urgency, and that wasn't really healthy for me. And I got used to it. I need to undo that effect and plan what I'm doing, say yes and no to the correct things with reasoning. I'm not going to just become lazy, and go into that mode again. It's something that I don't think that gets talked about enough, and I've seen a lot, including myself, where you're hitting a stride, you're doing all your deliverables, you're smashing them out of the park, people love them, and then as it happens, you want to take on more work because you want to be the best at what you do, and then people say, great, we can take advantage, not in a bad way, to utilize this resource more, and they get constrained into this, and then you kind of stop being useful to yourself and other people. So I think it's a good thing to note to try and prevent that eventuality that does happen to quite a few people.
It's upward managing whoever's creating the work, isn't it? Because tactical solutions, or I like to call them band-aids. If you put enough tactical solutions together, band-aids, you get something very loose and shaky. To your point, to me, you end up with something really, really messy, right? And the piece about change control, bang on. But I think a lot of tactical solutions can pass through a change control and seem fantastic, right? Because no one does the mathematics. Well, how far does this take us off strategy? Well, no, what do you mean? It's progress. And I think people get addicted to these tactical band-aid progress efforts. It's happened to me, but when it's visually to your management, stakeholders, it's we did a thing and we did another thing, but it can look great, okay, but it's 6 months down the line, where the hell is the system, and why doesn't it work for more than 5 minutes in a row? Oh, because it's made out of plasters. It's not a good look.
It's going 1 degree off on the compass, isn't it? Times that by 6 months, you're in a completely different path. You feel like you're moving in the right direction, you weren't though. And now you got to go back a whole lot of the way to go back the right way again.
Right. And I think you had something.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to touch on something that Smee said about how systems interact with each other, because I think that can make you slightly more effective at solving problems. You see, often as an organization grows, inevitably it becomes, there's a certain amount of entropy that occurs, and we become a little bit more siloed as well. Now, the problem with that is that, let's say I'm in a function, I'm in finance or I'm in operations. I have my monthly reports. Suddenly that's my world, right? That's all I know. These numbers that come in, these attributes that exist in this data, this table, right? If we understand the data that flows through our organization, not only in our particular domain, but other systems, how they interact with each other, we might actually find that other systems have data that could help us, and vice versa. It's especially in my domain in AI and data science. When I was young and I first started out, I thought, I could be a real cool guy, tough guy in the corner of the office, work by myself in the dark, solve everything. That it doesn't really work like that. This is a people's game. It doesn't matter what technology you use. It's a people's game. You have to make friends in the organization. You have to be someone that people want to help. A lot of times I've managed to solve something not because I'm the genius in the room, but because other people have lifted me up and let me see over the fence, and that only comes when you have a bit of understanding about other systems, other processes. What do other people do? So look beyond your own little playground and see what's out there. And you actually find that sometimes the answers are in another data set, if we're talking about within the business domain, right? That can then help you be a lot more effective in what you do and actually become more efficient. And if your solutions then are tied with other functions and other systems, then you're all kind of helping each other over time. And then you start to see very exponential gains in whatever you do. That's been my experience anyway.
I completely agree with that, Aaron. That's very similar to what I was talking about in terms of system-to-system interactions, and seeing a very similar thing even in the work that I've been involved in terms of different groups have different data sets, and actually these are mutually beneficial, right? The same data set can be answering different questions. And I think, again, the only thing I'll caution when you do that as well is sometimes you can understand that, well, actually, if I want to manipulate a data set a certain way, or even change the baseline structure, for example, or take away reports, for example, because now I'm going to get into a structured database, for example, is, again, one thing that can happen is then another team can come to you and say, well, What about, can you solve my problems as well? And that's where this whole like scope definition, boundary, minimal viable product, what we've set out to achieve needs to come back into the picture. And it's fine if it does, not to say you can never revise that, but there needs to be a stringent process around it. Otherwise, when your leadership's saying, well, why haven't you delivered this system? And you're like, well, look, 5 other customers came to me and told me to augment it for X, Y, Z reasons. You need to go through that process of saying, okay, scope's changed, this additional time estimation, etc. But yeah, no, completely agree with the sentiments.
That's a really good point, actually, both sides of that coin. And I guess the answer is, the business or people who run the business unit or the business entirely, depending how big you are, you need to make sure that there is the right time for, we're working purely on that strategic goal, or now we're working in a little bit more of a, this hour of time we're going to spend doesn't necessarily have an output, but learn about your colleagues and your friends, even make some friends. That's a really powerful thing, actually, because I think that's as you grow, one of the things that we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen. We're a small business now. Things going well, that will increase and grow, but the magic that we've got of everyone knowing exactly what everyone else is doing and who's good at what and who to ask is fantastic. And I can see over time, if you don't actively maintain that, it can get lost. And now we've got a problem of either everyone's just talking to everyone and no one's got a responsibility, or everyone's siloed and it's inefficient, right? So that's actually a really good validation of what me and Sean are thinking there.
Yeah, and now even just what you were talking about there, relates back to what I was talking about in terms of tech business partnership. The reason I feel that people in tech need to understand the business so much better is because if you can understand their processes and the reality of the world that they live in, those people want to interact with you more, right? They don't look at you as a completely different department. They look at someone that wants to help you. So, same goes as any aspect of life, right? Like when you're trying to make friends or whatever, it's understanding, essentially having empathy, all those things. It's very similar in a professional sense and in a technical sense. I understand what you need to do with this information. You understand what I need with this information. We understand each other's drawbacks, goals, objectives. So yeah, maybe we can work together in a mutually beneficial thing here. So yeah, it's critical.
I think we've gone through some really good topics there, and I think fantastic job. I'm not sure if anyone in the audience has got any questions, or we'll hang on for a few minutes until 6. But really, really good, stimulating conversation, guys. I learned some things for sure. I hope everyone else did. And I don't know, what do you guys think? Should we start that bread company? I reckon. You'd be able to do it in a week or two, right?
I'm actually allergic to bread. So
we can test how to market to even those who can't eat it.
Yeah, well then I might be interested. Then, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, look, I think go on, Sean.
I have a question actually to the group. So we're kind of talking about working in a siloed fashion and how that can be dangerous in a way. And then the other side of that spectrum is everyone talking to each other.
Yeah.
Which sounds great in practice, but then I've worked in organizations where everyone's kind of working their own little silo, and it's like there's no communication, or there's actually over communication, and everyone's talking to each other, and it slows everything down because there's so much traffic happening. I suppose, question to the group: in your experiences, how do you find the best way to strike a balance between communicating internally within a business, so you don't go to either of those extremes?
For me, it's literally again, for me, it comes back to scope, because with your scope is your stakeholder set, right? And from your stakeholder set and from your scope, you can understand what's the recurrence of communications at the different levels, right? In terms of, I need a weekly meeting or even a daily tap meeting with my product team. I need an additional level to that with the management of different groups I'm interacting with, a bi-weekly, and then senior leadership who are the people controlling the funds at the different phases of the project, 2-3 monthly, whatever. And for me, it always comes back to, like I said, defending that scope, because that's what it is for me. Especially when you have multiple players in the room that all want in this digital initiative.
Mm-hmm. Is this where automation and AI and that whole conversation can actually embed into that question, where there's always pushing information and then there's pulling information? Is there a way where information can be presented to an organization in an automated way where it can further reduce communication lanes, but the receipts of those communications still exist, if not are increased. Can AI and automation help with that? And has that been done effectively in your experience?
I mean, you got someone. I mean, I was going to say it just sounds. You know, I feel like when it's explained like that, it can be quite hard to almost understand exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, do we have project management dashboards that feed information and give updates on whether it's budget, timelines, deliverables, objectives? Yeah, those are very useful. People no longer need to send emails and be like, "Oh, this is how we're doing. We're on track for X, Y, Z." It's all fed into a tracker, and you can actually see that. It's just one example of something which alludes to what you're talking about in terms of reducing comms and making them more efficient. So yeah, I've seen examples of that, but the data is only as good as you put in, which is why the quality is important, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I don't know, Aaron, if you had anything to
I would say that, see, in organizations, often time is a commodity that we cannot afford to spare so freely, right? It's like in life. If you take one hobby, that's great, and suddenly if you have 7, well, you can't do all of them effectively. And if you extrapolate that idea to internal communication, you have to be somewhat ruthless with your time. As much as you might like Timmy from finance, you can't have a catch up with him every week or something like that. There has to be some kind of justification or business rationale behind all this communication. If it's just for the hell of it, then you kind of have to cut it out. There has to be, at the end of the day, you are in a business. There has to be some element of transactional nature to it, and I think that communicating, and there's a difference between just communicating for the sake of it and having open lines of communication to achieve a common purpose. I think that's the important thing, like Simit said, which is the scope. If I'm going to have regular catch-ups with someone, or we're going to learn about each other's domains, etc., like that, there has to be purpose behind it. It has to be driven by some business objective. I think that's crucial. I think if we keep that principle in mind, that what exactly are we trying to accomplish here, and then yeah, I think you'll be able to then start to focus on the interactions that make the most sense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. The reason why I mention that is because in Unizen, I've seen Navin actually do quite a lot of work when we have clients of how can we communicate information to them really easily, via whether that's dashboards or portals where they can come and have a level of autonomy and get their information with us without them having to chase us or us giving it to them via an email. And it's just from my perspective, I would sometimes see Navin working endlessly, and I'm like, what is he actually doing? And then eventually she says, hey, Sean, check this out. And there's a really cool, hot, snazzy IT portal where people can come in and see different service requests or where things are. They can track them and progress with stuff like that. And I go, oh, okay, great. And the reason why I mention that is it's more of a, I suppose, a learning point from me. When you have someone who's not that tech savvy in a business like me, and you're seeing someone very, very tech savvy doing a cool optimization, automation, or whatever that might be, sometimes it's really hard for me to know why they're doing it, even if they explain exactly why they're doing it. Because he said it, I think 20, 30 times. Like, Nav, we need to work on this though, because this is the most immediate P1 thing. And he's like, nope, trust me, you'll get it. And he's explained it perfectly. But then I see the product in action and go, you know what? I didn't understand it. You explained it in clear English. Sometimes, even if the problem statement is bang on clear and it's been communicated unbelievably efficiently and correctly, sometimes the user or the end user or the client or whatever that might be, or the internal business person doesn't know what they even want because they haven't seen what good even looks like yet.
It circles back exactly, Sean, to what I was saying earlier in terms of both sides of that coin, right? Until you show someone the context of their business process, your business process of reporting, for example, what's possible, you might not even know what problem you have to solve. So it is a balance between problem statement definition and showing people the art of the possible, essentially, with context. You understood so well what Navin was showing you because he probably used some real life examples of, what things you have to track, for example. So completely get it.
Sean, I think we're going to need Simi and Aaron in for maybe a week, and then we can get some. We can really get cooking on gas. I think they're going to unlock a lot of stuff for us. So you've given me some ideas, even just in this conversation. But just quickly at the time, folks. We've hit the 7:00 mark. Thank you, folks, for a really stimulating conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure we'll do this again at some point in the future, but Until then, have a brilliant evening, and yeah, take care.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
Yes. Take care, folks.